Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Edina Park Board, Tuesday, January 11th. Welcome to our visitors. If you haven't done so already, at some point tonight, if you would sign the sign-in sheet outside the front door, that'd be greatly appreciated. Not right now. You're okay. The first item on tonight's agenda is the approval of the minutes from our December 14th meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The second item on the agenda under old business but new business is the topic of that we've covered now for the last 3 meetings, and I apologize if this feels like Groundhog's Day here, but it's the discussion of the Braemar golf course clubhouse consultant concept, and I guess I'd just like to kick it off and start off with some thoughts, and I just kind of jotted some down. And my thought is that I'd like to propose that we, as a park board, submit to the City Council a recommendation that we utilize the services of a consultant, an independent consultant, to help us put together a vision for Braemar Park. As far as what to cover, the scope of services that I would like to see would be what we saw, like, for example, in that NGF or serious proposal on NGF. It was pages 1 through 7 of that proposal, along with, I think, a customer survey, which I think could be really beneficial for marketing and feedback to course management. I think that would be the most comprehensive. In the past, we have, to a smaller degree, used consultants for parks like Countryside, and I think Pamela, haven't we, Todd? And I think it was helpful to the community, and for us, I know I was there for the Countryside Park, and I think it was a really effective way to help prioritize a long-term plan for that park. Braemar is obviously a much more complicated enterprise and situation, but in the last 3 years, the clubhouse has lost $470,000, and I don't think that we should ignore it, nor do I think other taxpayers would want to ignore it either. In regards to utilizing a consultant, you know, I know it is $15,000 or $20,000 as an expense, but in our November meeting, our own city's finance director said the $15,000 is not going to make a big difference one way or another on a multi-million-dollar facility such as Braemar Golf Course to the financial condition of the golf course going forward, particularly if it can add value over the next several years. My concern is the larger ticket items. So in regards to a consultant, and I think I was kind of the one that brought this here, what I was thinking was, you know, as far as a consultant, I think it's important that the consultant not be in competition with our course. I don't think that they should be in the business of facilitating the sale or taking over the management of golf courses, and I don't think they should be affiliated past or present with the course management, and I think they should have extensive experience in the field. That's why in your packet, John contacted me about a company called Continental Golf and David Moody, and in researching it, it just didn't feel like it was the right fit, you know. And in hindsight, he wrote a very nice letter, and he actually worked at the golf course, or had Fred Richards at one point, and I really did like his letter, and I think he has a lot of knowledge and insights that could be very helpful on top of the data and ideas that we could gather from a consultant. So after our last meeting, I was looking around to find a local consultant, and I contacted the USGA, which is the United States Golf Association, to try to find a reputable lead. They had one that they put me in touch with, and they were from Wisconsin. However, they only worked in the field of turf management and maintenance operations. They suggested that I contact the National Golf Foundation, which I already had. So I guess in a nutshell, those are my thoughts. And Kia wasn't here at the last meeting, so I kind of filled her in to what we kind of covered, and she had some thoughts, and I don't know if would you share those?
And I apologize for not being present at the last meeting. I did watch it online. And to be honest, I was really pleased with your comments, Todd, about comparing how we have done long-term plans in the past with Pamela Park and Countryside Park, and how can we approach this enterprise facility with how we have done things in the past. It is different in the fact that it has a business component to it, and we do need to look at the operational aspects of Braemar. But I also think we need to look at the community input aspect of it, and I would like to entertain the idea of putting together a task force, as we have done in the past for Pamela Park and Countryside, or even the Veterans Memorial, to be honest. More recently, I have put together a handout kind of my idea of the composition of what I was thinking, and I've talked this over with Joseph. And this is certainly debatable. It's just an idea for what I had in mind. So the purpose of the task force would be to come together before the consultant came to Edina and meet and discuss what their concerns and questions would be for the consultant. In this way, they could present these questions and concerns to the consultant. And Joseph and I were able to talk to NGF, and they do take community input, and that is part of their report. So this would be valuable. But more importantly, the task force would be completing an evaluation of the report and then presenting an action plan to the park board. So I think this follows kind of the precedent the park board has set in the past, and allows for the community input. The individuals that have come to the park board that are interested in this. Personally, I am interested in hearing from at-large community representatives that we have not heard from, that may be interested in getting involved in this process.
Kia, thanks for putting together this list, and actually this is the first that I've heard of it, but it seems to me that putting together a task force and combining it with the use of an outside independent consultant would give us really the best of both worlds in terms of getting local input, focusing the study, and also getting a breath of fresh air. I think at the last meeting it was my request that we spend some time looking for a local consultant, and my thoughts behind that was that I thought that perhaps if we could find someone locally, it would reduce expense in terms of travel expense, hotel expenses, and the like. But as I look at the field of local consultants that are available, it concerns me that we not engage someone that has an interest in a golf course or that is in the business of conflicts of interest area. It also concerns me that we get a consultant who really has a fresh look at the club. I think that's what I'm looking for in terms of the outcome of the study. So thank you, Kia.
I'm still searching for a framework for myself to put our thoughts together around what it is we're trying to do. I would just make the statement that I think that systematic or systemic losses by Gulf operations in total over time should be unacceptable to city management and to the city council. And so if what we're trying to do is to take a look at forecasts which are continuing to project losses, then if the city council wishes the park board to take a look at ways in which we can stop red ink or stop an enterprise operation which is, for lack of a better word, systemically losing money, then I think we would have some sort of charter to do that. Until such time, who is it now that looks in detail at an enterprise operation or a collection of enterprise operations, reviews 1 year, and I think now is going to have to be a 2-year if it indeed is what I call a turnaround situation, 3-year plans, and perhaps 5-year plans also, to try and assure the city and the community that something that was not meant to be subsidized per se by other sources of revenue is indeed on the road to becoming healthy. Now, if that methodology requires or somebody thinks that it would be, we think it would be useful to have a consultant, certainly we could make that recommendation, I guess, to the city council. But I haven't gone into enough detail to understand the plans from the management themselves as to what it is they're trying to do to correct the situation, which I guess some of us are finding challenging, needs some kind of work. So again, I'd just like to repeat, I think systemic losses going forward are unacceptable. But how is it between Gulf operations management and park board as an oversight, city council as the accountable body, that we try and actually get something that is very meaningful in going forward? Now, a consultant who is going to do a long laundry list of 1 year, 2 year, 3 year operating plans, make detailed recommendations about pluses and minuses, things that can be done now and in the near future. My own personal experience is that the amounts of money that we're talking about are fairly modest. But in any case, I think any amounts of money that we might spend on something like this should probably be approved by the city council, even if we had local authority to do so for less than $20,000, which is also my understanding. Well, with that, I'll see if anybody else has.
My comment is we're not alone. Every private club in the Twin Cities I know of has an agenda item at every board meeting. How do we keep members and how do we get new members? Every municipal golf operation, City of Minneapolis through its park board has 4 or 5 courses: Hiawatha, Meadowbrook, Columbia, Worth, Gross, and they all have the same thing on their agenda. A lot of it is an awful lot of it is the economy. When the private clubs are going downhill and cutting staff, it's not unusual that municipal courses are also struggling. Some of it is the fact that kids are massively active after school and sports, and they need 2 chauffeurs to get the kids around, the mother and the father. Hence the downtown private clubs, most of them are gone around the country. The Minneapolis club is benefited by that wonderful parking lot they've got right outside the back door, but their agenda item is how do we keep and how do we get members. So much of it is the economy. I've been a member of Braemar Men's Club for, I think, 11 years. I get an email too often about the passing of a member, And what you don't get the email on is that 10 people are of an age where they've just decided they don't care that much about golf anymore. I think we've got pretty decent management, pretty darn good management at Braemar. We're lucky to have them. But a lot of it is, if we decide to go the consultancy route, it's a tough trend when the economy is as rough as it is. And we may sit here in 2 years or the next park board in 3 years and everything is rosy because the value of people's homes are higher and people are willing to take 4+ hours to play 18 holes of golf. The one interesting thing that I'd like the consultant and the task force to think about is, should we continue to have 2 dedicated executive or par 3 courses? Is one enough? And secondly, can we continue to afford 27 holes for our regulation course? It costs a lot of money, and you save staff and maintenance costs, seed costs, if maybe you only need 18 holes for a while until the economy improves, which is something I'd like the consultants to think about and the task force. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I don't think this whole process has ever been an indictment of current management or former management. I think Braemar's run great for the 40+ years of its existence, and we do have a great jewel in the middle of our city, and we have a great service that we can provide to our residents. But let's not wait until Braemar becomes a crisis or it's slipping off the slope too fast. And as in anything else, any major change is going to take a long time to ferment and grow. Just as we've done with the old Public Works building. I mean, we had a task force that basically just kind of defined the outline of what do we want there, and I think now is probably the time to look at Braemar and decide what do we want in terms of a 10 or 15-year plan, and I think a consultant's going to be maybe a good first step in starting to formulate that process.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that when I'm really appreciative of Kia's bringing up the fact that we might want to consider creating a task force. I think my concern is that we lose sight of the big vision. That we have this golf course that is beautiful and wonderful, but according to the 15-year plan, we're going to, in the next 15 years, have to invest, I don't know, I think I added up over $3 million somehow. Most of it purely maintenance. I have no idea how we would be able to fund that. I don't know what the priorities are. I do think that if we seek help for how we can go about budgeting for that, they can help us with that. I was really, the reason that I'm pleased that the task force idea came up was because I do want community involvement. I think that particularly the people that are involved in that golf club, when they came and spoke, I felt their passion and their love for that golf course. I want them to remain involved. I don't want them to feel alienated by us hiring a consultant. And I don't want us to waste our money on a consultant going down paths that the community doesn't want. So this idea of identifying what we want the task force to look at can save us some money.
I'm kind of catching up here, because I wasn't here last month, but isn't the general purpose of what we're doing on this right now to, I mean, the whole reason this conversation started was revenue enhancement, ways to get more revenue. We've spread this whole thing out into a much, I'm hearing things come up from people here that it's just, it's broadening the scope too much. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here with the golf course. Todd said it, it's been successful for 40 years. It's, compared to most public courses, it's very successful. We are in an economic downturn. I do like the idea of the task force, but, based on the letter from Dave Moody, and I know Dave, and I also know that he turned around Prestwick Golf Course and turned it into a successful place. Can't you combine the two? He's offering to do it for no fee and has good connections as far as the restaurant business and everything else. Combine the task force and Dave Moody at first here as a first step rather than doing that $15,000 consulting deal. Maybe it's not Dave, but I'm just trying to expand on the task force maybe, and then appoint them to focus on the revenue enhancement side rather than the big picture items first off here. I mean, you work together with the Braemar staff now. I mean, and I know this is kind of a flip from what I said initially as far as hiring a consultant a couple months ago, but this seems maybe like a good first step. And I do, sometimes I think, doing the task force and everything can be a little redundant and slow things down, but this one might just be a good first step. We're not in an extreme hurry here on this. The golf season coming up, you would want to get some ideas in there if they do want to implement some stuff this year, as far as youth programs and things like that they're already planning. But that's just my thought on it. I think we're kind of trying to stretch ourselves a little bit outside of what our initial thought was to just kind of find some revenue enhancement ideas here in the short term to increase the money that's coming in through Braemar. So.
Well, actually, my original thought was to have like an A to Z evaluation of the course. I mean, if you're going to look at the course, you might as well look at the course. And that's one of the things that I noted with John and Continental Golf, the scope of their, even he states it in his own letter. They don't look in as great a detail as an NGF or another consultant would look into. I don't see why we don't have Mr. Moody come in as well. If he and his colleagues, have a spot in their heart, because Dave worked there at some point to try to help us out, I don't see why we can't do both. I mean, it's takes a little time to build up this momentum and try to get something accomplished. Why just look at half of the operation when you can look at the entire operation? That was my intent from the get-go.
There seems to be support for the task force. Let me just ask, is there any questions or concerns regarding the composition or as far as making a recommendation regarding the task force? As far as what I proposed on the piece of paper.
In terms of notification requirements to form a task force, is there a requisite notice period that would slow the process down?
I'm going to ask John for help.
In my view, I think you can form a task force on your own. I don't know that you really need to rely on council to do that. If you would like staff to assist in that process, I think that's within your purview to do that. I think I would add staff to the task force. You don't have any staff serving on the task force, and maybe you don't want staff there, but that'd be my recommendation. And which staff, you might want to give that some thought if you do want any staff to participate.
Okay.
I could see it being valuable to have staff, that are present at those meetings, kind of help maybe direct thoughts and ideas a little bit too. I still would like to throw out a motion that we submit a recommendation to City Council that we utilize the services of an independent golf consultant along with a proposed task force.
And just to make it a record, so Kia and I
You need a
don't.
second before you can discuss.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will second it.
I wasn't trying to move anything ahead quickly. I was just trying to clarify. But okay.
Well, yeah, just to clarify, Kia's document was the composition of the task force is to in part determine the scope of the consultant, correct? Would you, and can you just comment on the scope of the task force?
Okay, so what I was trying to do is first go through this document and make sure we were all clear of what we were all in agreement of the scope of, or the composition of the task force. And then I was thinking we could go through this other part of the recommendation and maybe come to agreement on that part and then go ahead with the motion.
On how you think the task force would operate and its roles and
Right,
responsibilities.
instead of making a motion first.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. If you want, you tell me what you.
Would that
Yeah,
work?
yeah.
So I just wanted to have more of a discussion
Yeah, no,
first.
absolutely.
So because I didn't, and John, I apologize for example, I didn't include staff, and it's not because it just slipped my mind, and it was to no offense of you. So if there are any other wonderful suggestions such as that, please let me know.
Well, I agree that staff should be a part of the task force, and assuming that they will be, how many staff members would be appropriate?
Well, I think Todd Anderson should be part of that task force.
Okay.
The general manager.
My concern is that the task force not get so huge that it becomes cumbersome, and so if that would add up to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people on the task force. Is that usually within what task forces are?
I don't know, Ellen, how many were on
The small site task force it was fairly large. I can't tell you the number, but there were 20 plus, I think. And it functioned well being an open type of body. I think we ended up not turning away anyone who was interested in being involved.
Well, I'm in favor of keeping it as small as we can, and 10 would be just fine with me, and I think Todd should be added as the staff representative.
I like that idea.
Is there any additional ideas with the purpose or the timeline?
Yeah, and should we talk about the immediate timeline? What are we thinking here as far as?
Or, John, do we, or can we discuss that after we establish them, or how does it work? What is the relationship once we establish a task force?
Well, a task force by definition is a short-term working committee, if you will. It's not an ongoing commission or a board. So its life expectancy is until the end of the project, whatever that might be, however long it takes. Similar to what I'll characterize, the Veterans Memorial Committee. They will, I would hope, remain intact until their job is done. So task force, I think it's a little premature to determine how long it needs to be in existence. I guess you would want them to stick around until the consultant has done what the task force wants it to do, if that appears to be the purpose of it. And And then I would think stick around till the results of the study and the recommendations of the consultants are complete, and presentations are delivered to Park Board and City Council, and I would think the task force job would be over unless something surprises you. I don't think you need to have a definitive ending date, if that's the question.
So can we determine when they begin meeting, when we obviously then vote on the slate of committee members?
We could, as soon as it can be assembled, you can start meeting right away.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't mean to overstate what might be obvious, but John would be a part of this too, as like a staff liaison. I mean, we need to make him another member of this too, or is that just a given, right?
I would be happy to be.
Yeah, I think it'd be very helpful. The same way with the CAT team for the bike trail. I mean, it's with your knowledge and everything, it'd be great to have you there as well. So as far as like the timeline of something like this, you know, if this goes to council and they come back and agree and we say, okay, well, we, like Todd Anderson said, maybe this summer, or like NGF said, if they're going to do a site visit, it's nice to be able to come out when the course is in operational mode. So maybe we target something midsummer or June, July, whenever, and then say, okay, let's make a deadline to have this task force in place, you know, a month ahead of time, just to have at least one meeting or two meetings to have some discussion of what we're looking for, you know, brainstorm some ideas, and then ultimately, Kia, you had some ways in which you thought that task force could interact too with the park board.
Well, right, their purpose would be then to develop and present an action plan, and they would come before the park board and present that. And John, hopefully you would, you know, in your staff reports, be giving us updates as you have in the past with the other task force. And we would have members on the task force as well, so, you know, they can give updates as well, so.
I think that'd be an exciting process for the volunteers and the brain power you have out at the golf course, who are members of the associations and the clubs and whatnot. And I know they'd be anxious to participate and to be involved. One of the challenges you might face is there may be more than one that wants to, and it says, who do you pick at that point? That might be the bigger problem in the immediate, but no, I think you get a lot of support and enthusiasm for that. And I think the motion you have on the table, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you were recommending not just any particular, but just a consultant. You want a specific consultant.
No, not necessarily. I mean, I would like it to be an independent consultant. And no disrespect to Mr. Moody. I mean, it sounds like he runs an excellent golf course and has had some turnaround operations. But I think it's very important that it be an independent consultant, somebody that comes in that has no ties or affiliation with anybody at the course, to give us, you know, an unvarnished assessment of you know, recommendations. And so whether it's NGF or Sirius, or if you want to put out an request for proposal or whatever, or if that's what the city council wants to do, I think that's what we need to do basically as an advisory board to the city council, is not tell them what to do, but make a recommendation. And if that's what they would like to do, that's what I think we should do. But along with that, I think it is a great idea to have community involvement. And through both the proposals that I saw, that was a part of their process anyhow, was to have community input. So I guess I'd try to find a way to tie these in together. You know, I guess if I had to propose something, it'd be to submit a recommendation to the city council that we use an independent consultant. You know, if they should like the proposal that we put together from NGF, you know, and in contrast to, well, the Inverwood Golf Course, they spent $50,000 on a consultant. You know, this NGF came at the recommendation of the USGA, so at, you know, a third of the price. I think it's kind of surprising that they paid that much, but what do I know? So that's But tying in that consultant along with community input and making sure that we've got a task force in place that has enough time to have at least a couple of meetings before that consultant begins their process, so they can give their input to that consultant, and then when a consultant comes back and delivers their report, I think they should be able to see that. I think come back with some ideas of their own on what they think of what ideas they come up with and what was identified, and listen to those and then pass those along to council. And I think whether it's NGF or Sirius or whomever, they make a proposal. I know NGF said that they do, when I reread theirs, they come in and make a presentation to city council. So ultimately just finding the way to tie those in, defining what the task force is, and when the beginning date is, and then that task force, their job is complete. When they deliver their findings on what the consultant comes up with. How does that sound?
Well, I'm a little confused. Bill, you explained why you thought it would be best for this issue to be sent to City Council with a recommendation, but I thought the Park Board had authority to make a decision for expenditures that were less than $20,000. Isn't that correct?
The Park Board has the authority to advise the council regardless of the dollar amount.
Okay.
You don't have any power to spend money. You have the power to advise. Now, the way this works, when there's money involved, anything under $20,000 does not necessarily have to be brought to council. To expedite your process, I might suggest you just save yourself the time. If you have the consultant you think you want to go forward with, make that recommendation. It's under $20,000. Then it'll become the city manager's decision whether or not it needs to go to city council for consideration. Otherwise, he has the authority to sign the contract.
Well, it seems to me that we've spent a lot of time looking at these proposals, and as far as I'm concerned, based on the discussions we've had, I'd like to see the Park Board in its resolution, or not its resolution, its recommendation to City Council, recommend NGF. I just think that to have the City Council go through a lengthy process of listening to presentations for a less than $20,000 expenditure might not be in the best interest of the city, and it'll slow the process down.
I'm not comfortable sending a recommendation to the city manager. Being appointed by the city council, it is my duty to advise the city council, and therefore I'd like to send the recommendation to the city council.
I agree with Kia. I think there's been a lot of talk, and it seems to some extent people aren't really in agreement on exactly how we should proceed. And I feel more comfortable with Kia's recommendation of forming a task force, and possibly at the same time recommending to the city council that once we have some feedback from the task force, that we recommend that feedback be provided to a consultant for the consultant to look at. But I feel that it's premature right now for us to name a consultant and try and engage a consultant and recommend that the city manager sign a contract.
I think I see where Louise is coming from, but I do agree with Kia that I think the appropriate channel is to put ultimately that decision into the hands of the people that appointed us to be an advisory council. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying this is what we saw, and this is what, if it were to be a consultant, it would be something along the lines as to, you know, what NGF proposed. I don't know if it's inappropriate or appropriate to say this is the one we like, you know, but I do think ultimately we should put a recommendation out there for council, whether it's 10,000 or 100,000. If you look at it, I think that's where Key, I think, makes a good point. We're an advisory council, and I think that's what I'm comfortable with too.
A question for the park board. If you pass the recommendation that's before you now, what process would you recommend be used for the selection of a consultant?
Well, I mean, if they want, if the city council agrees with the recommendation, and let's just say hypothetically, they want to do their own due diligence, and so they want to put out a request for proposal. My only, request would be that they would include those two companies, as long as, like I said, my things that are important to me is that they be independent and unaffiliated with the course, and provide truly an independent analysis. And so if they want to put on RVP and we get 6 proposals back, I would assume we would get those, right? And we would be able to look at those, correct?
With all due respect, we've, I think, done some of that already.
Okay.
You have requested staff to do that, and then you put a stop to it. You've already done some of your own research, and I think that's fine. The question is, do not expect the city council to decide on which consultants you're going to use or to decide on the process. I think they look to you to provide that.
Okay, well, I'm trying to be respectful of council and their decision-making ability.
Typically, the way these things work is you would request, you feel it's in the best interest of the city of Edina to hire an independent consultant. Staff, would you please put together a request for proposal you can all look at, it gets sent out, and we can have them give presentations if you so like. You've sort of run that on your own. And if you're comfortable with where you're at, I'm okay with that. I'm not here to slap hands. I mean, I'm here to serve you. It's not the other way around. I'm here to support you, and we're always more than happy to do the legwork. That's our job. And I'm not offended by that. That's just part of the learning curve. I think to ask the council to tell you which consultants you should hire is not a good recommendation from this group. If you want to go forward, then, and if you're not comfortable with what you've got currently and you're not ready to make a decision, if you'd like the task force to be involved in that, that's okay. And if you want staff to do more legwork and send out more RFPs and get some other local ones, that's fine. But I don't think you should be asking the council to give you direction on what to recommend.
All right, I read you. So then I think, Robbie?
All right, based off everything I just heard from John and what's been going around here, the thing that seems to make the most sense to me right now is I'm not making a motion right now. I'm just suggesting this is what I see we go with today, and that we prove the idea of putting together a task force. Now, I like the start of what the composition of this task force is. I think there needs to be maybe some discussion outside of the meeting here to finalize what the actual composition is. I think we're on the right track. I just think there's a couple other ideas that we don't need to talk about necessarily right now. We can establish that and put it together, because we've still got time, because in the end, you're not hiring a consultant until the summer, because you said that it doesn't make sense to have them here when the course isn't up and running. Now, I think you put the task force together with the idea that they're going to be the ones to choose the consultant. Not necessarily choose, but point us in the direction, maybe, rather than us choose here, because it's park board members and people that are going to be more involved anyways.
No, the idea of the task force wasn't to have them.
No, I'm just suggesting this. All right, I think this is the direction. part of the point of putting the task force together would be for them to decide whether it makes sense as well for us to use a consultant. Be part of that. We want to use a consultant so they can help review and do all that, because like John said, he's done a lot of this work already. These people are going to be involved with it. So why aren't we just approving the task force for the today? Because you just said yourself that you don't want to approve the $15,000, or you want to approve the consultants today.
Yeah, I want to make a motion to City Council, and this isn't the motion, but I want to make a motion to City Council that we utilize the services of a consultant, and if it's NGF, that's the one that I'm most comfortable with. So if that's the one that I make a motion on, or whoever does, that's what I'd like to do.
Well, the point is though, the one you just said it yourself, it's the one you're most comfortable with. You're not.
I've explained to you my due diligence process.
I know your due diligence.
Everybody here was able to do the same thing.
Yes, your due diligence is great. I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying involve the task force in that decision. If you're going to make a task force, you might as well empower them in that way. That's all I'm saying. It's not a one-person decision or just us. Otherwise, don't even do the task force.
I think I agree to some extent with what you're saying, and Jim, and then before you, that the purpose of the task force, as Kia has written, would be to define specific concerns and questions. As she says, to ask the consultant, but one thing they could also do is to gain some answers to those questions themselves through staff, by hiring a consultant. There would be a variety of options open to the task force. It sounds like what we need is a body to bring us together around what it is we're trying to figure out going forward. And if the consultant can then answer these questions, propose solutions that we think might be helpful, then at that time we could entertain the idea of going ahead and hiring a consultant and sorting out which consultant would be best. But isn't the primary purpose of the task force, as I listened to some of us talk, to get the issues framed and the questions asked and our concerns defined?
I think we're just looking at it from different directions. My concept and Kia's concept was the task force is put together to let the consultant know what's important to us as a community and with that golf course.
Well, that may turn out to be the case. But that step has to go, you have to go through that step first. And you're not necessarily wedded to a consultant once you've made a list of concerns and questions, although a consultant may be able to handle all of the process. I don't know. But the task force would have to recommend that, wouldn't they?
Isn't the point, just a quick question, of bringing in the outside consultant to get a whole set of fresh eyes? So if you point them in the direction with the task force, and I just thought of this right now, believe me, I like the task force idea. But if you say, this is what we want, and you're telling the consultant this is what we want, and build it around this, then they're not really coming in with fresh eyes and saying, this is what we see you could do. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I just thought it was important because it's a community golf course. It's our asset to have the community involved in that process in some way. Making sure that they conveyed their list of concerns and thoughts and ideas for the course to that group. When ultimately whoever the consultant would be just somebody that would come in and just give an evaluation and ideas for the course.
Well, isn't what I'm seeing here is the task force can do that. They can come up with their group of ideas, and the consultant has another, and then they can combine after the fact. You get what I'm saying there?
I don't think anybody would suggest that we prevent the consultants from being heroes.
No.
We say make some suggestions that we have informed questions around. Right. That would be fine.
I know. I like the community involvement in the task force. Believe me, I'm all for the task force. I'm just saying, you have the task force, and then you can bring in the consultant, and then after the consultants come up with its recommendations, the task force has already spent time working on this. Putting things together. If we establish a task force in the next month, and then they have the time up until June, July, whenever this consultant comes, they're going to have their ideas of what the task force is going to have ideas of what suggestions they have, what they think is needed, things like that. Then if we do go the route of the consultant comes in, they come up with their ideas, and then the two can collaborate together after that.
I see where you're coming from, but the consultant isn't going to stick around and collaborate with the task force.
No, but you just compare that, fine, you get their proposal and you compare it with what the task force has been saying, and then you choose what's the best route to go forward.
But I would think that that would be our role as the park board.
Fine, it is. You will get recommendations from the task force and the consultant, and then you compare and you see where it's, but that's what I'm saying, make them separate then.
As the person who came up with the idea for the task force, I have talked to NGF on the phone, and I personally would recommend NGF as our consultant, and going ahead with them in addition to the task force. They have a great track record. They're independent. They know what they're doing. They have a full scope. They're going to give us tangible ideas. They're going to sit down with this task force, take community input. I was just very pleased with all the questions. They knew what they were talking about. Who knows if the task force wants to go ahead with a consultant, who knows what direction it will take, and so I was very pleased with my conversations with them, and if you haven't taken a look at their proposal, I would strongly suggest I can pass mine along if that would be helpful. But of all, what John said is we have done a lot of work looking for different consultants, and so I would not make a recommendation tonight without, to put a burden on City Council to look for another consultant is a lot. So we have done a lot of work, and NGF is a very is a reputable consulting firm. So take a look.
They've done work for Portland, Oregon, San Diego, California, Palm Springs, Houston, Miami-Dade County, Myrtle Beach. These are all some of their municipal clients they've worked for.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's doubting the NGF's capabilities or what they can do, but I think as a park board, as an advisory board, we need to rely on staff. So John, I'd like your opinion as to, you're the ones that if we need, new blacktop at Garden Park, you do your RFP, you do your whole deal, and you come back and you say, you know what, park board, we're going to go with Kia's construction company because they're going to get it done. In your opinion, if we directed you to get a consultant, what would you do? Would you say, you know what, we've done our due diligence, I'm comfortable with either of these proposals, or, you know what, we really need to do some more legwork and as staff, and we need to come up with something different than what we have?
I don't think there's any debate that NGF is a very qualified firm. They've done a lot of work. And when it comes to these things, you don't necessarily, the low price isn't always the best service. You get what you pay for. They are not the cheapest one in town. And what I think they'd probably do an outstanding job. I was sent on a charge by you folks to find local competition, but I think you probably can't go wrong with it. If you really want a fresh set of eyes like you've discussed, I think an outside look from that group would be just fine. And if that's the direction you want to go, I will fully support that, and I'm sure our staff at Braemar and all the volunteers, they're thrilled that you have that much interest in improving Braemar Golf Course, because I know it's going to be a tough road for a while still, like Dan said, the economic times and the way we positioned ourselves with the bond payments We've got a couple more to go, and we'll start digging out of this financial hole we got ourselves into.
What would be the timing of signing a contract with NGF or any consultant?
If it's recommended tonight, it could be rather quick, depending on the city manager and his sense of it. In my sense that he would support it, I would recommend he support it. I think that's how it would probably play out.
But would we need, I mean, would we need to do it that quickly, or?
Would we need to? Well, I guess the better question is, do you want to?
Mm-hmm.
This is not a staff-driven thing, which is fine, and I'm glad you don't see yourselves as a rubber stamp. You shouldn't. This isn't something the staff brought forward. This is something you folks have brought forward, and I applaud you. That's fine. You think that's the direction we need to go to turn things around? We're happy to give it our best shot.
When did it make sense to get the task force going as quickly as possible? And in 2 or 3 or 4 months, recommend to the city council the consultant, simply because you'd have some good and true local citizens looking at the issues, and you'd still have plenty of time for the golf season for the consultant to be here for a while. I have a very strong belief that Braemar isn't broken. It's the economy that's currently broken, and the economy in our country will get better, of course. But as I said, every golf course I know of is in the same difficulties. So I guess I put my stake on our fellow citizens to set the path and then look at the consultant maybe early or midsummer.
I like that idea. I mean, I think that as far as timing goes, we could use or ask that the Edina Sun Current just put out a feeler saying we're looking for people that, and we're forming a task force. We could use, you know, the other online sources like Edina Patch or whatever it is, and just throw out the feeler and ask people that if they're interested to submit. I don't know if we have an application or whatever, just their their intent or desire to be on that sort of a panel, and then we could go through it over the course of the next meeting or two. Try to have something in place by March, April, and give that group some time to get their legs underneath them, and then try to get an NGF out in June, July.
I was thinking, though, I don't want to waste people's time, and I think we ought to make sure that this is going to pass through City Council. If we're decided we're going to go through City Council, I think we should get their approval before we go and create a task force to have them.
I agree.
I think it should be a 2-part recommendation.
And can I just toss one other thought for the task force, since we're talking about possibly doing that? I do think that my experience is that neighborhoods like involvement in this type of thing, and I see that there's 3 at-large community representatives, but I would like to make sure 1 representative is from the neighborhood. I don't know if you want to reduce that 3 at-large to 2 plus 1 neighborhood, or I don't know about that, but I would like to have a voice for that neighborhood around Braemar. The question is that the scope is just not Braemar, it includes Fred Richards as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, am I?
I don't know. I mean, well, I guess I would say that I don't know that necessarily Braemar has a neighborhood. I mean, you've got homes along Gleason, I guess, but
Yeah, I think that those people would,
And to the extent that we form a selection process, that may be one of the factors that's considered in selecting the 3 at-large members.
you know, in the small site council, we broke up the city into quadrants and maybe do the same type of thing here. So instead of at large, you'd have representatives from different quadrants or sections.
I think it's going to be difficult to make that in the form of a motion, but
Yeah, well, all I know is that whenever I am involved in something that borders the neighborhood, those people want involvement, and I think that they have a right to have involvement.
right, but we're definitely going to need park board members to help, well, I don't need, either form a subcommittee to help select people for this task force, or I don't know if we're all going to go through it, but that we'll need that input, so.
Right. Well, it's my concept that I'd like to involve neighborhoods, but
Just to remind you, you have procedurally, you have a motion and a second on the table to recommend to the council to hire a consultant and form a task force. That needs to be acted on or
Would people
withdrawn.
prefer there be 2 motions versus 1 motion?
Yes, I would.
Procedurally, you have a motion on the table now that's been seconded.
Okay, so could I withdraw that motion?
I'm afraid that if we do them separately, then, I mean, they're hand-in-hand motions. The task force is acting upon the consultant.
My understanding was that the consultant was acting upon the task force.
No, I don't think the consultant is asking on the task. The consultant's acting, I think, independently. The task force is somewhat acting independently, but just providing ideas not only, or things that are important that they feel to the community, to that consultant, but also coming back with ideas to the board, to the golf course, and to council as well.
Right, but I don't think it's an accurate statement to say that the task force is acting upon the consultant's recommendations. I think, if
Yeah, I
anything,
agree.
it's the opposite. But regardless, they're, at a minimum, they're independent. The task force is going to come up with its recommendations, and the consultant's going to come up with its recommendations. And I think for the last 3 months, the motion that we have never really acted upon is, do we as a park board agree that we want to request that the city council hire a consultant?
Okay.
And so I think we should
Okay.
decide.
Do you want me to, can I repeat my motion and just see if that's what everybody remembers and if that's what we have on the record? Janet, could we do that? No?
Well, I think your motion was, I think you did a good job clarifying it earlier. It's not a specific particular consultant, but a consultant and a task force as presented by Keo.
Okay. Well,
Is that not right?
If my motion was to use an independent consultant, not specifying one, but with the caveat of also creating a task force, I would like to amend that motion and specify using NGF.
That needs a second.
I'll second the motion.
Discussion?
And the time frame, please.
And the time frame would be, I think, to try to get feedback from council, see if we could get it on their agenda for their next meeting, whenever that is, if it's this month or next month, and then convene at our next meeting and decide a course of action for putting out requests for people at large that want to be a part of this task force. Try to get a task force in place, I would say, by March, middle of March, April, whenever our meeting is, if we could decide by then, and then to have golf will be in full swing in the middle of June, and I'd like to have, recommend that there be the consultant out there to take a look at the course at that point.
I'm of the opinion that the task force has work to do before a consultant is considered or a choice made as 2 consultants. So I don't think they go in parallel, and I at the moment, based upon the discussion, I'm not particularly favorably inclined toward recommending hiring a consultant right now.
Well, that's the motion on the table, is to hire independent golf consultant using NGF, implementing the utilization of a task force, if we could, by the middle of March or April, and having NGF coming out in June, giving the task force 2 months to do their due diligence and formulate ideas.
I think procedurally, I think you should vote on the amendment first. If that passes, then you ask for a vote on your original amendment,
There was a second.
or your original motion, excuse me.
Okay, so the amendment was to you suggested to specify a consultant, not putting that in the hands of City Council.
You have made an amendment to your own motion, which was seconded. That needs to be voted on now.
Okay, all in favor of the amendment to the original motion?
Could we have a statement of the original motion one more time?
Sure, do my best.
You're not voting on the original.
No, we're voting
By
on
the way,
that.
you're just voting on the amendment.
The original motion was submitting a recommendation to City Council that we utilize the services of an independent golf course consultant, and at the same time utilizing a task force of, as stated in Kia's memo here, with the addition of one staff member and obviously John. The amendment was to, John's suggestion is saying we want to go with NGF, and based on, anyways, that was the amendment, is to give them a recommendation of NGF.
Thank you.
All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
What was the count? What was the ayes? Yep. The nays?
How many voted for the amendment? Put your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You need 6 votes to pass it. So the amendment to the original motion fails.
Okay. All right,
So
so
you're back to the
the
original.
original motion was suggesting to City Council that we use the services of an independent golf consultant as listed on services, for example, of 1 through 7 of NGF's proposal, along with utilization of a task force in the time frame we suggested. That was the original motion with the second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
The favors?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Passes. Okay. Did I count correctly
I
on
don't
the
think so. I think you
amendment?
missed my hand.
Rob, did you have your hand up?
No, you missed. I think you missed it. You missed it.
Yeah, we had 6 in the second one.
You missed.
Were there 6 hands
and
up
on the first.
on the amendment?
Yeah. No, there's 5 on the amendment, 6 on the original motion.
5 on the amendment. I show Tom, Kia, Ellen, Joseph, Louise. That's what I got.
Yeah, so if the amendment failed,
The amendment failed.
and this one passes.
This
Yeah,
one had 6.
so I didn't miscount. Okay.
Okay.
Like I said earlier, now that this has passed, what process are you now envisioning, if, assuming the council approves your idea, what process do you want to use for hiring a consultant? Because that's the one thing the council will ask of you.
Well, I'm anticipating a little bit of feedback from council, for one. I don't know if anybody else would, but that's what I would expect. I don't know, I've already stated, I think, what the timeline was that I think would be good, given the golf season and giving people enough time to get, like I said, their legs underneath them.
I think what John's saying is we need to give park board or council a more definitive outline, rather than asking for feedback from them, because it is
Well,
our
I
job.
think I said middle of June to hire.
Oh, no,
consultant.
I'm not, yeah,
And then
he was.
March, April timeframe to try to
That
get.
timeframe makes sense, but that's not what he's asking, I don't think, unless I'm hearing it wrong. You're not asking.
I must
for
be
the
hearing it
time-
wrong. You're asking for us to give them direction as to what time frame we would like to do this as far as.
No, what process are we gonna do?
What's the process?
Not time frame, process. Like,
Okay.
So are you expecting the task force to make a recommendation for consultants and have them come giving presentations to them or to you? Or what direction are you taking this?
I'd like to hear other people's thoughts.
Again, I think it should be, upon recommendation of staff, if you feel that the recommendations that have come forth already are sufficient, state that in your recommendation. If not, gets more, or send out an RFP to have another few companies kind of look at it.
I think John made it clear that he didn't want to do that anymore, that we've, the due diligence process in his mind, he thinks we need to make a recommendation. But that motion failed, so.
I will do whatever you would like.
Well, I voted for the amended resolution that didn't get passed. And that was to have the park board come forth to the city council with a name, and if that's not the case now, several names of consultants that we approve, at least giving the city council a narrow field to make a quick decision. I am really uncomfortable with having the task force be involved with selecting the consultant. The reason I feel that way is because I feel as though what we really need is someone from outside this community to come in and analyze the club. And I feel as though the task force is made up, and rightfully so, of people very involved in the golf course who may not have as independent analysis of the selection of the consultant. I don't know if I'm losing you with my verbosity, but I do not think that the task force should be charged with identifying the consultant. I think the task force should help narrow what the consultant studies. And so I would like to see the park board, if the other members feel as though they're uncomfortable with NGF at this meeting, to do whatever due diligence they feel necessary to feel comfortable recommending to the city council who we should use. I think I'm clear.
Well, as one of the members that voted against the original motion, which was whether or not we hire a consultant at all, I just want to clarify that we were asked to first vote on whether we wanted to recommend a specific consultant, and then asked to vote on whether we wanted to hire a consultant at all. And so both of my votes were no. If it is the park board's majority decision that we are going to recommend hiring a consultant, then I think it's a different question whether we want to recommend a specific consultant now that that has been decided. So I think it might be worth making another motion, because I'm not sure that members that voted against hiring a consultant, that's water under the bridge. It's already been decided that we are going to recommend that. And I'm not sure that confusing the process or asking the city council to get involved in selecting the consultant or asking the park board to do more requests for a proposal is appropriate. So I think in terms of simplifying the process, if we have decided that we are going to recommend hiring a consultant, I think it would be worth making a motion to recommend who that consultant should be.
I agree with Jennifer. I mean, the earlier voting was flip-flopped, and I voted the same reasoning that she did. If we are going to go with consultant, NGF makes sense. I mean, you've done the due diligence. John's done the due diligence. Dave Moody says it's a good proposal, except for the whole deal that you might get some broad things from outside, where they're bringing in information from out different parts of the country that doesn't necessarily fit. But in general, he says it's good value. I trust his opinion. I trust your guys' work on it. If we're going to go this route, I think we need, let's go ahead and just flip-flap vote back around now, since we've already said we're going to go with the consultant and make that recommendation. I haven't liked the wording of any of these votes yet. It's been a little bit cumbersome and confusing, but my point is, if we're going to, I'll go with what Jennifer said.
I move to recommend that the Park Board recommends hiring NGF as the consultant.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
How many ayes? Raise your hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Okay, and I have to just admit my confusion here. Okay, but if the motion that I think a lot of us are comfortable with and that we passed was a recommendation to City Council. So part of me feels like if we start to get into specifics of the timing of when we create this task force, aren't we kind of putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit? They could ultimately just say, I don't like either one of these ideas, right? I mean, it's January. I mean, I think if we were able to put a task force together and to have that up and running by April, and we had NGF in here in June, that gives them 2 months, right? I mean, do we have to decide all this tonight? Can't we wait to get some sort of feedback from City Council, whether they like this or not?
I think what I would like to see happen is to bring this information to the mayor and council as soon as possible. And if there's any opposition to the move, then I'm going to recommend that we do a quick work session with the council, have Park Board and council all around the same table, and hammer this out. And I suspect they'll support what you'd like to do, and we'll put our best foot forward to make it successful and hopefully get the outcome we're looking for. That's what I'll hope for.
Perhaps we could turn our next meeting into a work session, or could we schedule something in between?
I think we'll let our city manager discuss this with the council and see what their desire is from here. And they might think it's a great idea, sign it, let's move forward, or we need a work session. I'll let them decide that. And I suggest that rather than waiting to do this in a council setting, because it's going to delay the process. And what I'm hearing is you want this thing to start moving along. You want this task force to be formed and start meeting before a consultant comes on board. There's a lot of work to be done.
Okay. I guess let's move along. The third item on the agenda is public comments. Does anybody like to step up and? Okay, John. John. Any comments from staff?
Staff, do you have any? Public?
Good evening, sir.
I was familiar with protocol. My first
Just state your name and your address,
name
please.
is John West. I'm at 6113 Kmart Drive in Edina. And I just had a couple questions. This is my first meeting on this particular topic. I'm a fan of Braemar, love Braemar. And I was curious as to the issue statement. In the discussion about taking the issue or questions to the council, what would be the issue statement? What's the issue that we're trying to solve? Understanding that Braemar's perhaps not profitable, but one question is, how would you phrase that to the council? And then what would you ask the council to do? And then if there was some discussion about a consultant and a task force, what would be their mission statement? what information would you want from this task force or this consultant to make the appropriate decision? I think I heard a lot of discussion about a consultant and a task force, but driving down a little bit deeper, what information do you want from either the consultant or the task force to make a decision or a recommendation to council? I didn't hear a lot about that. What are we trying to solve?
John, actually, we don't have a practice of dialoguing during the public comment portion, but trust me, those will all be things that we'll be deliberating and talking about over the coming months.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
John, did you have any updates?
No, the only one just paid your attention to was the article that showed up on the Minneapolis Star Tribune that I copied in your packet. The reference to naming a small triangular piece of open space designated as a park. The one thing I don't think the article addressed is if the constituent feels that this is still something that they'd like to put before the park board, that there's always that option. Just so you know, I didn't tell them that wasn't an option. I told them, in fact, if you feel strongly, please feel free to do so. Instead, he chose to go to the newspaper. But anyway, that's how that played out. But other than that, no, we had a great winter festival at Centennial Lakes. As you know, Braemar's up and running. The golf dome got repaired in less than 5 days, and that's back up operational. And we're in full swing with all winter activities, and life is good.
Thank you, John. Any comments from park board members? If no, this meeting's adjourned.